Right. So, as I told you before, I'm a psychologist, I'm a psychotherapist, and I've always done modern psychological astrology, which doesn't mean I disregard classic astrology or Hellenistic astrology. I think each and every astrologer has to find his or her own flavor and brand of astrology. And the very, very aim of astrology, from where I'm coming from as a psychologist, is to try to help people to understand their inner needs better. And I think the Descendant is not taken into account well enough. So I am hoping to be able to inspire you guys today to do your own research, like look up as many charts as possible and play around with, okay, what's the sign of the Descendant? Where is the ruler? And aspects and so on and so forth. And you will see a whole new view on which kind of people you attract. I mean, attraction, that's a and of course you all know the movie Fatal Attraction with Michael Douglas, right? So it can pan out in a good way, it can pan out in a bad way, but as a psychologist, I strongly believe that we would never attract anything which would be out of our astrological zone. So I wouldn't call it comfort, because sometimes encounters can be pretty uncomfortable, to be sure. Yeah. So this is really what fascinates me. I've been doing astrology for, I don't know, 30 odd years, and I never spent a dull moment with astrology. Doing research, writing, lecturing, recording movies, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And the good thing is that the more you learn about astrology, the more you realize that there is more and more and more and more. And I think that really keeps you fresh and clever and sharp. And also you get to meet so many interesting people all over the world, and they're, I mean, really, really lovely, because other than that, one, as an astrologer, one often finds oneself in a corner like, what astrology? Okay, if you need that. I thought you were a serious psychologist. And I always said, oh, okay. And I never want to land in that corner where I have to defend myself. So sometimes I find myself not talking too much about it, but whenever I feel I meet someone who is interesting, okay, then yeah, ask me anything you want. Right. So I do love this saying, know thyself, because at the end of the day, this is how life pans out. And the older we get, I mean, presumably and hopefully so, the more we can become who we are, realize who we are, and can shed light on different parts of our charts. I mean, this largely depends on transits, but also on the people we meet, because they would tick our placements, right? So this is sort of like, I want to live within my own energy field. I want to encounter my inner dynamics. I want to unleash my inner needs and conflicts, but also, and this is very important, and this is my daily bread and butter, if you will, like giving, providing people with a sort of mirror. So like, okay, the way you come across, yeah, I'm feeling this and that, or when I look into your face, I see this and that, because I think what people don't do often enough is just leave our, so the way we think other people are and what they think about us, because more often than not, we are totally wrong. So someone can have just this sort of like face, or this sort of tone of voice, or this sort of looking, and we would say, oh, am I boring you? And you would like be like really pissed off, and then after a while you would say, am I boring you? And the other person would say, no, 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 not at all, I'm just I'm absolutely fascinating. So just do double check. And this is, I think, also where we as astrologers come in to say, okay, and I don't know whether you have experienced that, but oftentimes clients come and then you talk about certain areas in their chart. They say, oh, at last, someone really realizing who I am deep inside and all my facets and so forth. So the way we come across, and this is, of course, ascendant stuff, right? How do I approach life? Ascendant stuff. What do I need is more complex, because there, of course, sun and moon, we have to factor in communication, Mercury, the sexual planets, Mars and Venus. So, so it's just like starting at one point. And this oftentimes is the ascendant. Also, as you are aware, I'm sure, we can sometimes be very wrong. It's like, oh, okay, are you a Sagittarius? And he says, no, 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 I'm a Scorpio. But yeah, you come across like a Sagittarius. Yeah, I have Sag rising. So every person radiates the themes of their horoscope, whether consciously or unconsciously. So you can't stop people from getting their own impressions of who you are. And there is only so much we control, right? If that makes sense to you. And as soon, so the way I think of it is always like, okay, I'm running about, living in my own chart, free to meet other people with their individual charts. And sometimes it just, love, love, love. Oh, I like you. Yeah, you come across as really likable, sympathetic. And sometimes just as oh, you met him. So what do you make of him? I couldn't care less. It's just that, yeah, he might be nice or she might be interesting, but yeah, we didn't hit it off. Or very painful, just, oh my God, I really hated her. Or he said something which really got under my skin, and just, I don't ever want to see him again, and so forth. So every encounter may activate sensitive placements in our charts. This can be stimulating, stabilizing. Oh, and by the way, guys, you don't need to make too many notes, because I'm more than happy to supply you with the charts, right? So you can have the PDF. And you don't have to make too many notes at this point. So this can be stimulating, stabilizing, or disruptive and overpowering. I mean, this is also, some people are introverts, others are extroverts, and you really, the older you get, you really need to find out how much of encounters is good for you. Because I, for example, I have a very, very full third quadrant. So I really need stimulations. But then again, I often get like, oh, I feel drained. I feel running out empty. So I really have to pull the plug. So yeah, I'm sure that holds true for all of you. So each partner, and by partner, I mean each and every possible potential partner. So people we meet, like encounters, well, they have their own needs and expectations as well. So it goes both ways, and it makes life very, very complicated if we really want to look behind the mirror and show ourselves as who we are. I mean, as far as we are aware of ourselves, because more often than not, we are not fully aware of our little foibles and how annoying we can be, right? So on the one hand, we are unconsciously running about with loads and loads of desire, longing. We want to feel elated by other people. We want to feel fulfilled. We want to get inspired. We seek harmony. And of course, we expect the other person to bring out the very best in us, right? But on the other hand, where there is light, there is shadow. So frustration is always just around the corner. So sometimes people, when they come to me, they're at the point of breaking up. So it's a lot of shattered hopes, and just then they don't want to lose the other one, and they talk about sacrificing and sacrifices, and they feel insulted, and so it can become dysfunctional. At one point, I often wonder why people stay together when it's so obvious that they just harm each other. And this, of course, is where our childhood experiences might come in, because sometimes we might have experienced dysfunctional relationships as a child and automatically would assume, well, this is how people treat each other. So as adults, we oftentimes have to rethink and try to do it differently, to find healing in ourselves and in the other partner, right? So the first house, again, how do I spontaneously affect others? How do I come across? How do I get involved in life? What kind of glasses do I wear to see the world? So are they pink or are they gray? So you would also find the term persona. So which mask do I wear? How do I approach life? What do I look like? Which facial expressions? This is actually the whole first quadrant, and gestures are typical for me. How do I kick things off? How do I assert myself? So it's also about assertion versus assimilation. Now, the seventh house is what I call self-complementation. So any potential encounter with others, so the partner, the partnership, and please try to use this term widely. So it can be a business partner. It doesn't necessarily limits itself to romantic, sexual partners. I mean, that's why I like the term partner. It's more all-encompassing. So recurring themes in relationships. And this is very, very important, because from my experience, we tend to attract a certain brand, a certain flavor of people, a certain flavor, a certain brand of experiences. And this holds true for as long as we are not willing to sort of like break the patterns and try something different. And this is also where crises come in, because I think people are only willing, ready, able, willing to change themselves, if they are in a deep, deep crisis, or when something really wonderful pops up and you say, oh, okay, I like this person very much and I'm willing to march to the beat of his or her drum. So we, of course, we have to talk about projections. In classic astrology, you find in the 7th house open enemies as opposed to secret enemies in the 12th house. Also, it is the public at large. And it can be about everything I love, and I would seek balance in the 7th house. And I think well, I mean, the 7th house and Libra, this is often, some people say, oh, okay, Libra and the 7th house is all about harmony. It's about marriage. It's about diplomacy. And I'm saying, could be, but not necessarily so. And of course, it's how sociable we are and the ability to connect with other people. So then, of course, we have to talk about the ruler of the 7th house, because in the house, I'm working with Placidus, by the way, but well, you can work with any other house system, I presume. So by way of shedding light on the house in which the ruler of the descendant stays, and we will talk about each and every combination, will give you valuable insight in which area of life you really want to get invigorated by people you meet in your lives. And this is where disappointments can have their roots, because, for example, if you have the ruler of the 7th house, so let's say you have Leo rising, which makes Aquarius as a descendant, then we have to look for Uranus or Saturn if you are a classic astrologer, and then you have either Uranus or Saturn in the 3rd house, and then you would assume, or you would hope for a partner when he or she comes home from work. She said, oh, blah, blah, blah. Let's chat, and how was your day, and how was my day, and so everything connected with the 3rd house will be enormously important by way of how the partner is connected. And just assume we are together with someone who is quite the introvert, or comes home and has said, please don't ask me any question, I want peace and quiet, then of course this would be a source of constant frustration. So you either have to look out for other people to invigorate your 3rd house, or you have to look for another partner in the long run. And of course, this is only the first step, because the next step would be the aspects, right? So what aspect does the ruler of the 7th house receive? So what needs are aimed at a partner? So first of all, so we would talk about the sign. So I would take you through ascendant and then descendant, because astrology is oftentimes a matter of contradictions, right? About opposites. Then we will have a look at the ruler, and then I brought you some chart examples to, to play around a bit. And of course, in addition, always bear in mind that the 8th house is one step further down. So this is when people really get under our skin. This is when the you and the I become an us, and something's got to go. So that's logically the next step. So we meet people in the 7th house, and when we really get intimate, we would take them into the 8th house, and of course so our 8th house would be the 2nd house of other people. So it's about sharing values and so on and so forth. But that's a different ball game. Let's stick with the 7th house, shall we? So there is this saying, which I really adore, because it's so it's such a relief. So it's just, you cannot not project. We automatically project. We walk about, and as soon as we hear a voice or watch a movie or see someone walking down the street, we say, oh, he's lovely, or she's ugly, or he reminds me of my grandfather, and so forth. So this is all happening unconsciously, and it's really, really hard not to do that. So the first step is always allow yourself to project. There's nothing wrong with projections. It's just we can be led astray. Just factor that in, right? Which is normal. We are humans, and this is how life is, right? By the way, this is a graffiti in London, and whenever I'm over in London, I do take lots and lots of pictures from these brilliant graffitis, because it just as well is that 3 months later, someone has sprayed it over, and they're really, really pieces of art. So unfortunately, I can't attribute the artist, but this is one of my favorites, right? It's Hamlet with the skull, right? Okay, so projection. We might project own parts of our psyche, needs, whims, etc., and they are projected onto the partner. So like, why are you like this? And or it annoys me that you're always tired, and that might be, and I'm not allowing myself to feel that I'm tired. So it's much easier to say, pull yourself together. I just can't stand you when you're so drained out, as opposed to, I think you might be tired, and now I'm feeling I'm tired as well. So let's just take it a notch down. So why are we doing that? It's our psyche is like overloaded. It's like contaminated. It's all a big old mess. and we tend to fend off anything which is too much for our psyche, and even children do that. So to a certain degree, this is a very healthy dynamic, and our psyche is really clever in getting rid of stuff we feel overwhelmed with. So I don't like to feel, I don't want to assume that I'm in a bad mood myself, so I blame the other person. Sorry, I have to take a sip. For being in a bad mood. And this is one of my research subjects, because being grumpy and being in a bad mood is very, very common. And I think it's very important that each and every day we have to ask ourselves, why am I in such a bad mood? Didn't I get enough sleep or food or whatever? And just try to, okay, how can I get myself to be in a better state and not blaming others, because this is very typical actually. And also, and you might call it a transfer or a projection, and it depends on what school of psychology you follow. So typical inner voices might say, or you might actually utter that, you remind me of my father. So external, essential, and behavioral characteristics of certain people, which have unconsciously impressed themselves on us, are transferred to others. So impression transferring. This effect leads to confusion and makes it difficult for the partner to present him or herself as he or she actually is. Like, give me a chance, right? The danger can be either idealization. Oh my God, I adore you. And I always say adoration, not the cleverest thing to do, because people will disappoint you, because that's like the flip side of the coin. All right, if you adore people too much, of course, they are bound to disappoint you, because they're not gods and goddesses, right? And the danger, of course, is the devaluation and the contempt. You are as bad as my father, right? So traps can be extreme projections, idealization versus demonization, no realistic view of the partner, but an instrumentalized one. We only see in them what we consciously or unconsciously want to see in them. Then, of course, it's the whole ball game of victimizing and, you know, shaming and blame game, addiction and codependency. And again, I'm not judgmental here. It's just, it's a realistic view into the way we humans interact with each other. Whenever I let someone into my life, it's a whole new ball game, and there are hidden agendas and so on and so forth. So destructive power struggles might be, you know, working. Perseverance and ambivalence. Ambivalence is also something I do a lot of research about, because we usually can't deal very well with ambivalence, because it oftentimes stops us from making decisions or saying, okay, whenever I'm for this, I'm automatically against that. And we don't want to take on the responsibility, because we don't want to make mistakes. People are frantically afraid of making mistakes, and they all want to do it the right way, and we don't want to regret anything. So we are often in this sort of like gray zone, being stuck in ambivalence. I'm not for it, I'm not against it. Of course, some people are more daring, and, you know, they can deal with all the results of their deeds. Right. Of course, and I'm sure you all know that, if you have a planet in the 7th house, this is immensely important. So let's play around a bit with that. So, for example, if you have the sun in the 7th house, so these are normally people who really need the mirror function from other people. So just, okay, show me who I am. So what's your impression about myself? So if you if you cut these people off of social encounters, which must have been really, really painful during the pandemic. So they really need this mirroring function, right? Hold on, I have this thing here. I don't want it. Oh, okay, there we go. So others may have a great influence on the way we define us, right? So of course the sun, as I always say, has oftentimes something to do with our father image, the way we experienced our father. So this can be a matter of looking for a father, or that we are a father figure for something else, but it's all about responsibility. Who am I? Who are you? So these people also might experience boundary issues. So where do I stop and where does the other begins, and vice versa, right? So hold on, this is even more complicated when the moon comes into this ball game, because you all know that moon issues are much more unconscious as opposed to sun issues, because the sun is all about our consciousness. It's like the conscious part of ourselves, and the moon is where we of course are prone to mood swings, moody, and it's about our feelings, and it's also about the mother figure. And this is the book I'm writing at the moment. It's about the moon and mother issues, because this is so essential, because we oftentimes also look for a mother figure in other people, and then we want to be a mother to others as well, which is really complex. And since the moon is more subconscious than the sun, this needs for us as astrologers more gentle work. In particular, some men are not very well aware of their moon issues, because they're not encouraged to do so, whereas girls, I mean, times are changing to be sure, but still, it's still true that boys are more discouraged from coming into their feelings, because they don't want to be weak. Yeah, so moon issues for some men are still associated with, oh, I don't want to feel it, I don't want to go there. So just think that you meet someone, or you yourself have the moon in the 7th house. So this is someone is really touching something very precious, very vulnerable inside of you. And of course, it's a great need for care and self-care, a need for a mother figure. So whenever you come across the chart with the moon in the 7th house, so the issues are caring. So it's all about care, right? And of course, emotional fluctuations in partnership, because each and every house where our moon is placed, we are prone to experience fluctuations. It's not a steady house. Of course, Mercury, as you can well imagine, it's about communication, learning, intellectual exchange is important in partnership, and the need for inspiration, like talk to me, tell me what you think, I need you. Venus, of course, so it's a sensuous planet as well as a social planet. So it can be about diplomacy, consideration, sharing beautiful things, and so, but also the partner should bring beauty in our life. And sometimes it can be difficult to experience conflicts. So I have couples who really are afraid of rocking the boat, and they don't want to break into any fights. So it's all pushed down into the subconsciousness, and it, pans out in other areas. So I really have to try to make them at least come to terms with some of their conflicts. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a fight, but if you only want harmony from your relationship, of course, at one point you will be in deep trouble. right? So Mars is a very complex planet. It can be about energy and about actions and assertions, and you want this sort of energy from your partnership, and your own aggressive parts can be projected onto others, or you can land in competitive relationships. You attract people with whom you easily get into conflict. You want to take the initiative yourself rather quickly, or others will. And Mars in 7 can also come with boundary issues, and of course it's sexual sparkles, even more so in the 8, but in 5, in 7, Mars can send out sexual sparkles as well. So Jupiter, of course, Jupiter in 7 can come with high expectations of partners who want to broaden our horizons, and relationships should be meaningful and auspicious encounters. And I don't necessarily like the term needy when I work with Jupiter. I like to replace it with hunger, because hunger is a more vital thingy in life. And also, if you work with men and talk about neediness, it's not a good idea. So just to say, oh, okay, where Jupiter is in your chart, this is where you're really hungry, right? You really want to bite off whatever comes across. Also, it can be, you have such high expectations, and of course high expectations come with disappointment, and that's what you don't want to. It's a bit like a Sagittarian person, so it's all about, I want life to be super, to be always inspirational, and I don't want the gray shades, and I don't want the disappointment. So please stay inspirational to me. Don't disappoint me. Don't be boring and bland, you know. So also, and I came across that expression the other day, and I don't know how you guys would use that on a day-to-day basis, but I really like it. So you feel blessed and highly favored. It's brilliant. So, oh, it's nice to meet you. Oh, I feel blessed and highly favored. You know, this is a Jupiter feeling. So, of course, I do attract people, as you can well imagine, as a couple counselor, who have Saturn issues, to be sure, right? So if you have Saturn in the 7th house, either you are looking for someone who is more mature than you are, just please take care of me, yeah, or you end up the one in the driving seat, and you attract people who just, I'm so scared, I can't do that, please be my Saturn, right? But one thing for sure is these people take relationships ever so seriously. So it's no laughing matter. It's like, okay, loyal, reliable, and we're dealing here with maturation through relationship. But at the same time, it can be a source of a lot of frustration, limits fear of failure, and overperforming. So sometimes strong age differences are possible here. So which is something which I think is very pleasurable to experience, because normally it's quite usual for men in a certain age to, you know, to attract younger women. So a man in his 50s remarrying again a woman in her 30s is like, just, yeah, it's boring, yeah. But times are changing, and luckily so. And the latest trend, you know, the last 10, 20 years is that women are more self-conscious, and when women are in their 50s, 40s, or what have you, they might attract younger men as well. So it's a different ball game. And if you look at the charts, you might find it might be a Saturn issue, you know, differences in age. Uranus, of course, you either attract very, very strange people, right? Uranian people, so weirdos, aliens, and they can be ever so inspiring and which is lovely. But let's, for example, say you have moon in Taurus, that you are a person who really needs continuity, safety, and then you have Uranus in the 7th house. So you end up attracting these weirdos or people with distance issues who don't look for symbiosis. That can be tricky. So you have to find your way to deal with these unconventional relationships and find your way. And I think this holds true for each and every placement in the chart, is that between symbiosis and total distance, there must be sort of like leeway, right? So you have to find out where you are on that scale. Do you really want to be ever so close to someone? Or do you think like, oh my God, I'm suffocating, just come on, distancia, por favor, you know? Or you just want, I don't know, a lot of freedom. And this can be a source of disappointment and also a source of getting the other wrong. Yeah, people mate, and after a while they realize, wait a minute, this is not at all how I want my relationship to be. So sometimes people decide to remain a couple, but maybe move into different flats or even different cities. Or on the other hand, relationships might start totally platonic, like, okay, just have a friend, and then realize, oh, this is such lovely company. And even if love, so whatever that means, I always refer to love is a 4-letter word and a big old black box. And so whatever you put into the black box, there is no definition which holds true for everyone. And then you might end up with, we used to be mates and now we are, you know, a proper couple, what have you. So Neptune is, of course, Neptune is a trickster. It's a very tricky planet. So at the one hand, there is a deep desire for symbiosis. So you just refinement. So you don't want your life to be just rough. So you are looking for the elusive. So Neptune is also, just as Jupiter, a planet which is easily prone to idealize, that's a tricky word, in partnerships, tendency to get lost, right? So to deceive, not to see clearly. And in a moment, I'm going to show you that, for example, if you have Virgo rising, right, which is, oh, they really have their shit together. Just it's Virgo, it's all about structure and, you know, just cleaning up and so on and so forth, which of course it's a cliche. And at the other end of the spectrum, of course, if you have Virgo rising, you automatically have Pisces at the descendant. What does that tell us? We Virgo rising, and I'm a member of that club, we attract very, very strange sort of people and encounters. They may come across as messy and as like, who are you? Who are you? I just don't get you. And this can be very inspiring and, you know, making our life much more creative and gentle. And oh, I left out an E. So this is the German way to write Neptune, right? So we will look at that later. So Pluto, of course, it's never only about power, but also about powerlessness. That's a strong word, isn't it? Powerlessness, right? Of course, the old transformation, whatever that means, I just think it's hard to grasp. So what does it mean? Of course, we are all living in a world of transformation, and we are, and oftentimes we only realize that in hindsight, like, okay, when I was in my 20s or 30s, then I experienced this and that, or I met this and that person, and that really had a transformative effect. Pluto is about magic. it's a bit like Neptune. So Neptune and Pluto can be magical planets, and Pluto doesn't savor lukewarm encounters. Well, Pluto doesn't care for that, does it? So it's just like, I'm seeking encounters that really get under my skin, right? So it's the fascinating, mysterious partner. So let me wrap it up at this point. So the sign, so the descendant, is where we find any typical characteristics, and it's like the how we experience encounters. So the properties of the sign are strongly dependent on how planet receive aspects and how many other planets there are. So again, do we have planets in the 7th house? Of course, we always have to take them into account. They are enormously important. And then, of course, we have to find the ruler, which I'm going to share with you, and is this sign. And this is an easy task exercise, I think. So again, I myself, Virgo rising, okay. Virgo, do I like it? Don't I like it? Depends. So, but Pisces, do I like people with a lot of Pisces going on? Yes, no, why not? So the first step is like, really, so what is your view on this particular sign sitting at the cusp of the 7th house? Just, this is the very first thing you can do. Just like, okay, take a moment. I am, I don't know, Leo rising. So how do I like Aquarius in terms of energy, in terms of typical Aquarian people, and so on and so forth, right? And then the house. So again, this is the area of life. For example, my Neptune is in the 4th house. So I really crave people who are homey and want to be comfy. And I would be deeply unhappy with somebody who does not like to stay at home, who always wants to be out and about. I would be deeply unhappy, right? This is not the right flavor of partner for me. And by way of looking into my chart, I said, that's why. No wonder. So come on, just, this is like, okay, the second step, right? So the status quality of the respective area of life, so where the ruler stands, depends strongly on which sign and how the ruler is placed. I'm sorry, sometimes I did not translate it myself, but let, you know, PowerPoint do it, and sometimes odd stuff comes out, so the sign cuts it that way, you know. Please bear with me. Okay, so the AC, it's the me, it's my personal charisma, it's how do I affect others, which glasses, masks do I wear, how does the world see me? Again, which sign, rulers of the first, planets in the first. And of course, we all know, so where the ruler of the first sign is like the ruler of the horoscope, right? So we attach an enormous significance to that. But why don't we attach the same significance on the ruler of the 7th? Because these are others, the partners, encounters. What kind of people do I attract to complement me, myself? How do I see others? And again, which sign, rulers, blah, blah, blah. So let's have a look at the time. I think we can do another 10 minutes if that's fine with you. Yeah. Okay, so let's kick off with Aries. So if you have Libra rising, right, then automatically you have descendant Aries. So you would attract Aries issues, and you would have to look for Mars in your chart. So stimulating can be, you meet people who are courageous, fresh. I think fresh is a lovely term for Aries energy. It's a fresh energy. It's unfiltered, it's authentic, it's they won't lie to you. I mean, they would insult you also, but you know, it's into your face, it's highly energized. people who dare to do something and have easy access to the I function, right? So it's about self-assertion. Aries is about how do I assert myself into the world. But of course, the flip side of the coin can be, these people can be enormously irritating. They might appear selfish, and their spontaneity is not reliable enough. So they're too ruthless, too fast. And then, of course, after a while, everything just fizzles out. So, oh, okay, a moment ago you said this and that, and now it's all different. Yeah, you know, this is Aries. So the task here is to learn, to dare to do something, to allow conflicts, and to become more vital, because people with Libra rising sometimes have an air of they are too nice, they are too polite, and at one point you realize, am I buying into that? Are they really authentic? There must be something unsympathetic, because that's how people are, you know, where there is light, there is shadow. And if you have Ascendant Libra, you don't want to scratch that surface. It's more about, hello, I'm nice, and I don't want to rock the boat, and I like you, and blah, blah, blah. And I've often been fooled. I have a lot of Aries energy. So I have sun in Taurus at 0 degrees, but I have a stellium in Aries. So I do attract, because well, I told you before, astrology is a matter of opposites attract, right? And of course, whenever I meet people with a lot of Libra going on, of course, they form natural oppositions to any of my Aries planets. And on the one hand, I would feel hooked and I feel charmed, lovely people. And on the other hand, I said, well, actually, where is the deeper commitment, or where is the authenticity? And so, you know, it's a bit, and that's where I get ambivalent and stuck, you see. So the conflict is about assertion versus assimilation. It's a different ball game. So if we flip the coin and presume you are dealing with people with Aries, sorry, this is still called Widder. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Widder in German means Aries, right? So Waage means Libra. So born with Aries rising, and then of course you end up with Libra at the descendant. So these people might attract Libra issues. So they have to look for their Venus in their chart. And of course, the typical Aries way of life is to, well, come on, what are we waiting for? Just, you know, be daring, be the first, be the explorer. And feedback is often like, just wait a minute, don't run off like this. And how about being a wee bit nicer, be more refined, take other people more into consideration. So the feedback function here is often like, hold on, you are just too much. You are way over the top. You are all over the place. You are just too much. You are overpowering your environment. So this might be irritating. So it's about being decisive versus being weak in making decisions. So just waiting too long, because a Libra way of dealing with issues can sometimes be stuck, because you don't want to take up the burden of responsibility, because it's always likely that there is somebody whom you have not taken into account enough. So like, I'm disappointed at you. So this is horrible. It's a horrible feeling for a couple of signs actually, but not Aries. Aries people are never just overpowered by people being disappointed, and we say, oh, you know, don't be so lily-livered, don't be such a pansy, just come on, you know, like that. So the lesson to be learned here is, of course, to be more considerate. I mean, you don't have to be like at the complete end of the spectrum, but still it's like me versus actually I didn't ask the others what they would like to do. And of course, patience. Oh my God, Aries is such an impatient sign, wouldn't you agree? And mind the interest of others. So the issue here is like mellow down, just take a notch down, right? So of course, as soon as we are dealing with fixed signs, that's a different ball game, because the energy is likely to get stuck, right? So imagine you are dealing with one of these magnetic Scorpio rising people. So they would attract Taurus issues. So you also have to look for the Venus. And of course, Taurus is a very sensuous sign, and it's about enjoying what you have, enjoy the vibra, and of course, holding on. I think this is a very, very challenging axis in the chart, because Taurus is about holding on. Scorpio is about letting go, right? It's about death and reincarnation, and everything has to change, and don't trust. And of course, Taurus is, but you know, I want to trust, and I want my life to be beautiful, and don't rock the boat. And if I had it my way, everything should remain the way it was. That's why typical Taurian people do like repetitions, and other signs might say, oh, that's dead boring. Well, whereas if you have Taurus sun, Taurus moon, or Taurus rising, it's like, oh, let's do what we did last time. That was so pleasurable. And I would really like the reassurance of, we are going to have a nice time, because I'm going to have the same food, or, you know, going to the same places and so forth. So irritating can be the stubbornness, because both signs are pretty stubborn, as well as Leos and Aquarians, because this is fixed energy. This is really stubborn people. So why do I attract people who are so reluctant to change and denying the evil or the dark side or what have you in life? So the struggle is like, look over there, it's bad, or just don't be so naive. Taurus, it's the second sign, and experiences haven't been too elaborated at that point. So Aries and Taurus is still a pretty naive sort of energy, if you will. So people are nice. So if you have like cows on a meadow, they are just, well, of course, just peace and quiet. So suspicions of negativity are challenged. So that's, again, the flip side. So you can say, okay, you can remain suspicious. You can subconsciously decide never to trust anybody, because as soon as you open up, people will hurt you. This is the Scorpio way of life. So on the one hand, you would love, because it's a water sign, right? You would really love symbiosis. Water always seeks to be near, and to have this yearning of to becoming the other person. While on the other hand, you are so suspicious, and you are afraid of being hurt. This is why people with a lot of Scorpio going on often appear so reluctant and passive aggressive, because their take on life is, before others hurt me, I'm going to hurt them. And of course, Taurus is like, no, come on, it's a friendly environment. Just, you know, life is beautiful. So it's a sensual and lasting relationship these people look for. Okay, so the flip side would be, so if you have Taurus rising, automatically you attract Scorpio themes. Like, hold on, I thought life would be chewing grass and enjoying the sun on my meadow. And she said, no. Life is pretty dangerous, yeah. And people might hurt you, people might disappoint you, and people might try to get something away from you, because this is horrible for a Taurus focused person, like just, this is mine, just don't take it away from me. Just say, no, but this is not yours after all. So on the one hand, the sheer seductiveness of the Scorpio sign at the Descendant is so tempting. So we're really talking about erotic encounters and intense people. So you will attract, so and of course to some degree this is either if you have Pluto in the 7th house or Scorpio at the cusp of the 7th house, you will attract intense people, fascinating people, mysterious people. So people who make it hard for you to pin them down, right? And this of course can be deeply disruptive or deeply enjoyable. So you have to get involved, and even without security, and you have to allow transformation and learn to let go. Again, when the I and the you meet up and merge, there is an us going on, and this cannot happen without pain. Something's got to go, right? So these people are looking for a passionate, intense relationship. Right. Now it's the mutable signs. So Gemini at the cusp of the 7th house. So Sagittarius rising. And of course, you all know that the conflict between the Gemini and the Sagittarius sign is all about, do you know it for sure? Do you have all the information? Or is it about, I believe? I don't need all the details. I believe, you know, I can feel this is the truth. And the Gemini part says, hold on, no, it might be, but then again, it might not. So Gemini is a very critical sign. So we often underestimate because it's such a pleasurable and entertaining sign. But if you scratch the surface, Gemini energy can become very critical very quickly, as soon as you confront them with too much intuition and emotion and stuff like this. So, no, hold on. No. Also, a couple of years ago, I, for the first time, came across this English expression, and I really love that, is to be of two minds. We don't have that in German. And I really love that, because this is a Gemini sort of being in the world, to be of two minds. Wouldn't you agree? So you would have to look for Mercury, of course, in your chart. And the stimulating effect of Gemini at the cusp of the 7th house could be, wow, life is so varied and there are so many choices. I mean, choices and options are also Gemini issues, and also irony and humor. Gemini energy can be pretty sharp-tongued and witty, often then doing harm without intention. And it's all about diversity. That's also a Gemini word, diversity, right? And also it can be pretty irritating, because you are confronted with all that ambivalence, because Sagittarians don't want ambivalence. They want to say, I deeply believe in this. I'm inspired by that. Oh, you know, I'm disappointed. I am a disappointment, so I'm looking for something else to adore, to admire, to aspire to, right? So what can work out fine is to become a teensy weensy little bit more critical, so to become more Gemini, and to take more details into consideration, and not be too quick to say, I know it all. We said, actually, I do need another opinion. I do need to read another book. I do need to ask this or that person to have more details on your points of view. So you look for more versatility and variety in the relation. So what if you have Gemini rising and Sag at the cusp of the 7th house? You would attract Sagittarius issues, and you would look, to be sure, for Jupiter in your chart. So the stimulating effect of a Sagittarius way to look into life, look look at the world is always like, wow. So Sagittarius, a typical world is wow, just wow me, overwhelm me, don't underwhelm me, don't bore me. And I really want to say, oh, I really love this. I'd like to do this. I'd like to travel here. I've met this person. Oh, a lovely person, blah, blah, blah. So it's always like way, way over the top. So the exotic, the foreign, the mind-blowing, the vision, traveling, learning, widen your horizon. And of course, this can also come across as pretty arrogant and pretty like, actually, isn't it all a lot of just hot air, you know? So it's the other end of the spectrum is the, actually, I don't need that diploma. I know it myself, you know? So you went to university? Oh, no, just, what, who needs a diploma? Just, I'm vastly exaggerating here, of course, but this is like being too uncritical. So enthusiasm can be ungrounded, unfounded. And if you just poke often enough, you will find weak spots, right? So what this is all about, it's about Sagittarius is about the meaning, the vision. And Gemini people are often a bit like, life has no meaning. I mean, I don't know. I'm too critical. And no, count me out. And she says, well, actually, there must be a meaning. I might not be able to put my finger on it, but at least I'm open enough to encounter the journey. So what's my meaning of life? What's behind it? And so forth. So I think this would be a good time to make our break. How about you guys? 5 minutes? What say you? Right.
Wonderful.
Lovely. So, okay. So if you have Capricorn rising, you would automatically attract Cancer issues. So of course we have to look for the moon. So a stimulating effect here can be all about domesticity. That's a tough one. Caring. It's about security, love, and this is a typical Cancer word turn. Cocooning, right? While on the other hand, because if you have Capricorn rising or Saturn in the first house, these are usually people who have a good grip on their self, and it's all about self-control, not just letting your guard down. And Cancer, of course, is it's a different ball game. So it can be about appearing moody, wistful. It's all about dependency, clinging. So clingy, emotional manipulation. So crying and victimizing, blame game, childish, immature behavior. Because the repertoire of Cancer is more varied as opposed to Capricorn. So Cancer energy for Capricorn energy can be really, really overwhelming. So you have to, so you really have to open up. So it's about trust. It's about allowing, and now I'm actually using the word needy, because this is not about hunger. It's about being needy. All humans have a tendency to be needy. This is to a certain degree healthy, and what's to expect, what is to be expected. So looking for a caring relationship. So if we flip the coin, so if you have Cancer rising, you would attract Capricorn issues and have to look for Saturn in your chart. So a stimulating effect for these Capricornian encounters can be, it's about strength, you know, be solid as a rock. It's about being reliable. It's about adult. So Capricorn is pretty much an adult, a mature sign, and taking responsibility. The irritating side can, of course, be it can come across as cold, aloof, very insensitive. So a typical mantra for Capricorn is just pull yourself together. Just pull yourself together. Yeah. Insensitive, hard, uncompromising, and unforgiving. I think Scorpio and Capricorn are not very forgiving signs. Of course, it depends on the rest of the chart. You all know that. So it's about responsibility. And these people would look for a stabilizing relationship. So caring versus stabilizing. Okay, here we are entering fixed territory again. So Leo. So Aquarius rising is a very odd sign for the ascendant, because these people can be utterly stimulating and entertaining and like really unique. And this can also cause a problem, because when things get too personal, and I would argue that Leo is the most personal sign, because it's all about me, me, me. It's the sun, right, where we find our center. So whenever things get personal, and Aquarius energy might feel trapped, because it's about, I'm always different than others, but if I am to describe myself, it's easier for me to say, I'm not like this, I'm not like this, I'm not buying this, I'm a bit like that, but then again, no, right? Versus Leo is the opposite. It's about I am defining myself. It's about my ego, whereas Aquarius is about getting away from the ego and looking from a different perspective. It's about groups, it's about tendencies, it's about trends, it's about being in a distance. So what can be irritating here is to be confronted with narcissism. And of course, there is such a thing as healthy narcissism. And that's always like, at the end of the day, I do find that I am a likable person. And if people like me, I feel it justified, because my self-esteem is solid. So that's what we call healthy narcissism, because this term is wrongly used all the time. Narcissism as such is not a bad thing, right? But of course, it can get pathologic quite easily. So it's about being childish. Both Cancer and Leo can be a bit on the childish side. So just making yourself the center of everything, lack of critical distance to oneself, no self-humor, and so forth. And that can be pretty confusing for an Aquarius rising. On the other hand, you would learn here, and this is a bit like having Taurus at the cusp of the 7th houses. You learn joie de vivre and enthusiasm, creativity, and of course self-love. Just enjoy yourself. You've earned it. Yeah, no need to have a guilty conscience. Just enjoy yourself. So you have to find a balance between accepting that others are wonderful, as well as without losing self-love. So don't get overwhelmed by all the brilliant Leo people out there. So it's looking for affirmation. And you can see it's tricky. So these fixed pairings are tricky, because they can get stuck. So if you have Leo rising, I don't know about how it is in Australia, but statistically speaking, in Western Europe, Leo and Virgo and Cancer are very often to be found. I don't know why, but statistically there are more people with Leo, Cancer, and Virgo, and Cancer rising, as opposed to, I don't know, Pisces or Aquarius, right? So you will attract Aquarius topics, and you have to look for your Uranus if you're a modern astrologer, or Saturn if you're a traditional astrologer. So the stimulation will always come to get a more objective grip on life and take a distance, go a step back and keep a cool head, not become addicted to admiration, because that's a trap. I told you before, adoring and admiration is always a trap in relationship patterns, because you will get disappointed, right? And of course, Aquarius can be a pretty cool, aloof, and standoffish sign. So this is like all the Leo passion can get, you know, like a cold shower. So the intellect rules over the feelings for Aquarius. So the community spirit and the one-on-one friendship versus admiration, because Aquarius is the sign of friendship. And friendship is not like the romantic sexual Hollywood idea of what other people might have. So if you have Leo rising, interestingly enough, you would be looking for the unconventional relationship, right? So now Virgo Pisces, this is what I've already started talking about. Let's take a deep dive here. So with a Pisces rising, you would have to look for Mercury in your chart, because Mercury is the ruler of Virgo. So the stimulation for a Pisces rising would come via a grounding energy. It's about order, about reasoning. It's to counterbalance the tendency for chaos and feeling lost. Others can bring order into my life, structure and order, give me grounding and reason when I sink into chaos or threaten to take off. This is a therapeutic matter, because if you, for example, deal with people who are prone to angst, and then you would argue, okay, so what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Try to distance yourself and try to develop another voice inside your head. It's okay, this is just a feeling. This is just a thought. This is not the whole you. So this is what Virgo energy is very good at, to say, okay, let's structure it. Let's have a closer look at that. And then you will say, at the end of the day, there's no need to be scary, right? But of course, it's a very critical sign. So being constantly criticized, being constantly analyzed can be nerve-wracking. So, and the world can lose its magic spark and taking the fun of life. So it's not okay the way I am, because Virgo would always say, you could work a bit on here, you could work a bit on there. So it's always about self-optimization. Virgo is a sign which is always like, oh, I can do better. I'm not good enough, right? So looking for order. If we flip the coin, as I already told you, with Virgo rising, one tends to attract Pisces issues. So look for Neptune or Jupiter. So other people might come across as mega creative, mega compassionate, highly imaginative. Then they can play these hide and seek games, and they might slip away. You can't pin them down. Also, Pisces is a sign of devotion. This is a lovely term, I think, to be devoted. You can devote it to a cause, to a passion, to a person. And this can also be irritating, because you might enter a zone where it's about lying, it's about addictions. It's horrible for a Virgo to become addicted, to lose control. That holds true to some degree to all earth signs, unreliable, constant disappointment. So Pisces is a sign of dreams and feeling elated and feeling very close, and it's beautiful. And at the other side of the spectrum, because it's two fish swimming in opposite directions, and they are stuck with the umbilical cord. So it's a bit like Gemini, the other dual sign. It's a sign of ambivalence, of being of two minds, or here like being in in two states of energy. So while one fish constantly wants to run off, yeah, run away bright, and want to be in another world, the other fish wants to be in the here and now. So the compromise is to learn to dream and allow creative chaos without becoming gullible, right? So looking for more symbiotic. Right, now let's play out this little game, and this is what will be your homework, I presume. So what if the ruler of the 7th house is in the 1st? So let's say, for example, you have Aquarius rising, then you would have Leo at the cusp of the 7th house, and you are someone who has the sun in the 1st house. So this is not only the sun is in the 1st house, which means it's all about myself, and people with the sun in the 1st house often come across, I mean, that only holds true if the sign of the ascendant and the sign of the sun is in the same, yeah, because it could be that your ascendant is at 20° Virgo, but your sun is in 7 degrees Libra, and so on and so forth. So you have to be careful there. But in this case, the sun is also the ruler of the 7th house. And what I would expect with that placement, consciously or unconsciously, from the partner is the partner should support me. The 1st house is about me. And interestingly enough, there are couples when it's all about, and I'm not talking like the cliche housewife here, or behind every successful man, there is a supportive wife. And no. It's much more complicated than that. And also it can work the other way around, that the male part, I mean, if we talk heterosexual, straight relationships, supports the female part. But it's really important. You need your partner to feed you off, that you can become more daring, more assertive in the way you approach life. So now imagine you come across someone who also needs a lot of support. Then you end up in a competition, right? So it's helpful maybe to find someone who already feels confident, who already feels full, if you will, easily satisfied, and doesn't need that much attention, right? So just to scratch the surface, I mean, it's always like, okay, then you have to look like, does the sun receive a wonderful trine from Jupiter, or does Saturn form a conjunction to it? So, I mean, you get the picture. The whole story only begins when you take the aspect into account. I do work a lot with aspects. Okay, so what if the ruler of the 7th is in the 7th house? So each time a planet, a ruler, is in the same house in which it stands, so that makes this house enormously important, because you don't have to travel about in the chart. You just start and end in the same house. So these houses are always very, very powerful. So in this case, ruler of the 7th in the 7th is the partner, should be my life partner. The relationship goes above all. So this is not about me. This is about us. I defined myself as, I don't know, the boyfriend of, the husband of, or the business partner of. Yeah. Please bear in mind, don't take it too narrowly and limit it to solely sexual and romantic relationships. Just allow more nuances with the term partner, right? So without a partner, life has no meaning, right? Encounters are often very stimulating and make me feel myself in contact and exchange. This stimulation is absolutely vital. So we have two different scenarios here, if you will. So I need my partner so that I can become more myself as a single person. Whereas I don't want to be a single person for myself. So I want to define myself through the partnership. So I find the we much more enjoyable than the I, which is a vast difference. Wouldn't you agree? Right? And if you come across like, oh, okay, uh, maybe I'm very partnership oriented, and it's all about, okay, what do you want? What can we do? And come across someone maybe with a strong Uranus who would say, just don't be so clingy, or I find it really uncool if we always define ourselves as a couple, right? So it's also a matter of definition. Right. So what about if you find the ruler of your seventh house in your second house? The second house is about our values, our talents, but also about, I'm sorry, about our self-worth. So the psychological angle on the second house is, this is where I find my self-worth. Now, imagine you have something fluid in the second house, like the moon, then you have a fluctuating feeling of your self-worth, right? Or Uranus, you would find yourself like so at odds with how other people deal with life, and that you would realize you have very different talents, or that you feel at odds. But if the ruler of the seventh is in the second house, these are usually people who like to accumulate something of value with the partner, like build a house, or the partner makes me feel rich, right? The partner defines my values. So as in all earth houses, encounters have a practical, materialistic, sensual touch. Eating out, but also building a house, securing and persevering something, and building boundaries. The second house is also about boundaries. So again, difficult partners who are too freedom loving and or not practical or sensual enough. I mean, there are people, surely enough, who don't attach any significance on earthly belongings, right? And of course, you can argue there is nothing wrong if you like to accumulate beautiful things, or would you like to earn to own a house or a flat. But if you meet someone who feels constrained, like I said, I'd rather spend my money on traveling, that's troublesome, wouldn't you agree? So the eighth house is the opposite of the second house. And this is, of course, shared values, or the values of others. It's the house of crises. It's the house of transformation. It's the house of being confronted with our shadow. And this is, as I told you before, where a relationship is taken onto the next level, where the next skin layers are peeled off. So these are very, very intense relationships. So either the partner should go through, or this is a very literal translation, to thick and thin. So like good times and bad times, right? Grow through crises and share intimacy. So the eighth house is the most intimate house we would find in the chart. This is where, yeah, where really the going gets tough, and where we could lose ourselves. So losing ourselves, again, can be a pleasurable or a painful experience. It just depends, right? So encounters do tend to become quickly intimate and close. So be careful, because you get, the eighth house is also a house of entanglements. You get caught up in the drama of other people's lives. And these people also often land on the couch in my practice, because they are desperate. They say, I didn't know a relationship could become so addictive or so entangled, and just please help me to disentangle it, right? transformation and letting go are required, but of course, very, very difficult. So if you end up with superficial people who don't want to get to close, who just don't want to get close to you, they either don't want to share who they are with you, or they take no interest in learning all about you. It's just like, oh, too much oversharing. Don't just, no, don't do that, right? So if you have the ruler of the 7th in the 8th, expect a tendency for you want the real thing. You don't want lukewarm, right? So this is the example I already told you about. People with the ruler of the 7th in the 3rd house. The partner should satisfy my need for talking, chatting, intellectual exchange, sharing interests. Also, the 3rd house is the house of neighbors and siblings. So these might be areas where you want your partner to get involved, right? So it's also a very curious house, the 3rd house. And if you end up with someone who isn't inquisitive, who isn't nosy, who isn't curious, who just like, oh, whatever, then it can become frustrating really quickly. Or you end up with secretive, calm, introverted fellow human beings who need little stimulation, are not curious, and need little exchange, right? I mean, there are people who are just happy to, I don't know, to watch the telly or to take a walk and follow their own train of thought, which is fine. I'm not being judgmental here, but if you have the ruler of the 7th in the 3rd, you would be bored. You would say, oh, come on, I thought you were more stimulating, right? And the 9th house, of course, is broadening horizons. Like, life is bigger than my day-to-day life. The street where I live, the town I live, or so I want to know about foreign countries, about different languages. Maybe I have so many other passions. I don't know, attending night school, something like that. And if you have someone, so if you end up with someone who is like, seen it all, known it all, I don't need that, that's disappointing. That's frustrating, because you need to be adventurous in your partnership. You want yourself with your partner to broaden your horizons, that life is a journey, right? Okay, so this is a duck, obviously, and I do love the way ducks dive into, you know, themselves and then close their eyes. This, for me, is always a very, very powerful symbol of the 4th house, because the 4th house is not only about our roots, our home, our family. It's also about, in the 4th house, I find in myself my roots. All water houses are intensely private, are very intimate. And the 4th house can be something like none of your business. Yeah, just no. This is not open house. Just stay away from my door. So you have to be on your guard. So if you have the ruler of the 7th in the 4th, which to some degree also holds true for the other water houses, 8 and 12, you have to be extra careful, because these people will really touch the grounds of your personality, because these are private houses, these are soul houses, right? So what you really want to is, on the surface, you might want to have a home with that person, you want to build a family, or you want to share their family and your family, but on a much deeper level is you want to find roots in the relationship. I think the most romantic and beautiful definition I once heard about what is your partner to you is, my partner is where I feel at home, where I can anchor, I think that's a beautiful expression. And I think we could spend this further. So we might be able to find traces of where we feel grounded and rooted in friendships or in other people, but this is really fourth house stuff. And again, you will end up disappointed if you end up with someone who does not like cocooning, has no interest whatsoever in becoming private and relaxing and letting you have a look into his or her soul, and vice versa. Right? So the 10th house, of course, is a whole different ball game, because the 10th house is about our goals, our meaning in life, it's our social status, right? So so we would be looking for someone who is career oriented, who wants to build up something, and who looks for a certain social status. And I don't mean necessarily becoming rich and famous, and no. But these people oftentimes have a certain image of who they would like to be for others, right? And this can be, I don't know, I'm the owner of a grocery store, or this could be within my neighborhood, I'm the one to where all the others come to when they're in trouble, blah, 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 blah. So it's like my social status. And this is often a very practical house, the 10th house. But what if you end up with someone who has a more like fluent, devil-may-care attitude? Like, how do you define yourself? I don't care. What are your goals in life? I don't have any goals. So just live my life from day to day. Deeply disappointed. Deeply disappointing, right? So if you have the ruler of the 7th and the 5th, this can be a very playful placement, because the 5th house is not only the house of children and of self-expression, a very creative house, a very flirtatious house, and a house where we play games. It's also a house of hobbies, right? So this can be a playful placement. But what if you end up with someone who is really earnest, who doesn't like to flirt, who doesn't know how to enjoy him or herself, or indeed, children, no thank you. I mean, this is serious, isn't it? I mean, if one partner really craves children and the other just either says, I don't want to, or I can't, for several reasons. So you have to find a common ground here, right? So the 11th house, these are often relationships where your partner is also your best friend, your confidant. Because the 11th house is where we find like-minded. I love this. I really love this expression. It's to find similar interest with like-minded people. And of course, in Hellenistic astrology, it's the house of hopes. In classical astrology, hopes, wishes, and so on and so forth. So I don't know whether you agree with me, or with friends, we also have an undercurrent topic of they make us feel more accepted, because nothing, and I think this holds true for all of us, nothing is more invigorating than getting the feeling that somebody gets us, who we are, as opposed to, I'm so frustrated because I just can't get across who I am. People get me wrong. This is really painful. And if you have the ruler of the 7th in the 11th, you would really look for similar traits, or the things you can share or talk about. That's really important. Right. So this is a very serious placement, the ruler of the 7th and the 6th, because the 6th house is not a la-di-da house. It's about day-to-day chores. It's about me taking care of my health. So it's the house of sickness, but also of preserving our health. So you do need someone who is very practical and can support me in my daily tasks, and also this is an equation which might end up with I get sick, my partner has to care for me, or vice versa. So you at the very least have to have this sort of mindset as when something happens which really needs hands-on, I'm there, and I must attract practical people. So what good is someone if he or she is just like, can't do the shopping, can't do the washing up, I can't tend to this, blah, 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 utter chaos, right? That's frustrating. So this presumably is the most vague, complicated and obscure placement you can end up with. So the ruler of the 7th in the 12th, because the 12th house is so multifaceted. So we can talk about sharing fantasy, sharing creative hobbies. It's a house of compassion. It's a house of privacy. It's a house of retiring. It can also be a gilded cage, right? Because in classic astrology, this is the house of, you know, institutions, right? And I mean, honestly, any relationship can feel like a gilded cage, or like a nightmare, and you feel trapped and you don't have the insight to look behind the goings on, because in the 12th house we also find deception, lies. It's so you don't really get the grip. And interestingly enough, some people with planets in the 12th or with the ruler of the 7th in the 12th either have affairs, like there is more than one obvious partner, there is also someone in the back, right? Or you have a dream of a partner, because sometimes people say, you know what, I could have a partner, but I'm so disappointed at the choices around. I'd rather stay in love with, I don't know, James Dean or my yoga teacher, whatever, right? This can be a 12th house feeling. I'm in love with a vision. I'm in love with a dream, and I want to adore. Again, the 12th house can be a place of adoration, right? So it's a tricky place. And if you come across charts like that, you really have to find a way to unfolding the mysteries of the 12th house. So again, the water houses are pretty private, pretty intimate. They are soul houses, and also they come with their own brand of mystery. I think water houses want to keep their privacy. So don't peek too much, like none of your business, right? Okay, now I brought you some practical examples. I don't know if you remember Julia Child, right? She was in the 1960s, 70s, so an American hobby cook who made cooking her passion. And she introduced to the American public at large the art of French cooking, right? In the 1950s, cooking was restricted to, you know, boiling eggs and, you know, opening cans. I just watched a movie the other day from the 60s where they are in a supermarket, and it's just like aisle after aisle, just shelves with cans. So all you needed was a can opener at the moment. That was supposed to be cooking. So she met her husband, who was a diplomat, and she was much taller than him. And they had a very passionate relationship. And he was supportive of her because she was so full of life, and she admired his intellect. So he was really sharp as a knife, and They lived in Paris, they lived in Germany, because he was a diplomat and had to travel from time to time. And he was always fully supportive of her. And the funny thing is, I think she was 6'2" or so, and we're talking 1940s, 50s, 60s. So I mean, she would be towering most of the people even today. But imagine that 50 years ago, right? And he was much smaller, but he was so self-confident. So he really loved this big, big, big woman. And everybody who met them just said they were so in love. They were so very much in love, right? This is a very romantic story. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie with Meryl Streep, Julie and Julia. So this is like the life of Julia Child in the 50s and 60s. And in modern times, a young woman called Julie, who takes upon her to make a blog where she cooks for 1 year every day a recipe from Julia Child's cookbook, right? So it's Julie and Julia, and it was nominated for several Oscars. And of course, come on, Meryl Streep. I mean, how good can it be? So we have the ruler of the 7th house sitting directly at the cusp. Can you see it? So of course, this woman is totally devoted to her husband and wants devotion. Of course, we are dealing with Jupiter. Remember, a very hungry planet, like not less is more, no, more is more, right? And of course, it's in opposition with Saturn. Julia Child had to really fight her way through because she wasn't taken seriously. It took her 10 years to master French cooking. It took her another 10 years to write that cookbook. She was really determined, but she had to deal with a lot of frustration. And of course, they had to leave France because he lost his commission. They had to travel to other parts. They lived in Scandinavia, they lived in Germany. And what she really loved about France, of course, that's how she fell in love, was the food, right? And if you have to move away from France to Norway or to Germany, you have different sorts of food. But I mean, look at the T-square. So we have Jupiter and Saturn forming squares to a Venus and Mercury in Virgo in the 4th house. And of course, the 4th house is the home. And since they had to move all the time, and since a lot of her cooking took place at home, so she worked from home, you might say. And the interesting thing is, I'm doing a lecture in London in person in May, on which I'm really looking forward to, is about planets in detriment and fall. And of course, Julia Child had a Venus in Virgo, right? So she really made the best of it, and she was so determined. So please look it up. Okay, I don't know if you remember Alistair Campbell, who was chief political advisor of Tony Blair, Labour Party, sharp as a wit. He has a brilliant podcast called The Rest is Politics, sponsored. Is it sponsored by The Guardian? No, I think they're independent. And he was a workaholic, and he suffered from terrible depression. Terrible. And he went public with that. Very brave, a very, very courageous man. And he had the love of his life. This is his spouse, Fiona, her name is, and they have 3 daughters. And she really had the toughest of time because he was either always out and about, working himself to the bones, or being so depressed that he wasn't approachable at all. So if you look at his descendant, it's at 29 degrees Aquarius, and also Black Moon Lilith sitting on it. So what he really craves is an unconventionally strong woman, And this is what he was able to find with his wife. And of course, the ruler of the 7th house, so we're looking Uranus, is in the 12th house. And to be in a deep, deep depression, which had to be treated for many years, has a strong resonance with the 12th house, because you feel cut off. You absolutely feel cut off from your emotions, from the world at large. And what you need then is a partner to accompany you to the arts of the 12th house. So you might also say you need a partner who's willing to sacrifice, right? And I always say, what is true love without sacrifices, without compromises? And there are so many people out and about who want to eat the cake and have it, and just very, very quickly frustrated if a partnership comes into an area where you have to make sacrifices. And I always say, oh, okay, I get it, but then again, I don't know, just I don't believe in love without making sacrifices. But then again, I'm an 8th house person. I have Venus conjunction Saturn in the 8th house, so I don't know. You might have a lighter view on love. Please be free. This is just my own little way of approaching this. So this is, of course, a King Charles. And we all know the story about how disastrous the marriage to Diana Spencer was, because she was needy. She was a troubled soul with a horrible childhood, and she felt terribly lonely and unloved. And she was looking for love at the wrong place. And Charles also was a deeply unhappy child, and who needed support and adoration, and it was just a big old mess. And of course, as we all know, he should have sticked with Camilla, but Camilla at that time had her own issues and wanted Andrew Parker Bowles, and the family wasn't supportive, so la la la. I mean, we all know that. So this is a different ball game, because just as Alistair Campbell, we have Aquarius at the cusp of the 7th house, but we have Uranus in 11, which is different. Yeah, that's a different kettle of fish. So what he was looking for was a companion, a friend. And of course, even in the dark years of them both having an affair, which was really frowned upon at that time, and there are still people who are pretty unforgiving and still feel that Diana was the victim because Charles was so much older and would have needed to be more mature. Still, if we look at the picture of these two people in love, still in love, in their 70s, I think this is a very modern way of love. Also that it's a mature love, but it's also a love which has its roots when they were young and looking for companionship, right? So let's look at Prince William, who is now the Prince of Wales. And interestingly enough, I mean, again, not again, sorry, scrap that. So he has a Sun, Moon conjunction. These people often look for unison in the marriage of their parents. And of course, William, as a child, as a teenager, suffered immensely from the breaking up of his parents, and of course, washing dirty linen. It must have been so embarrassing. I mean, just think of being exposed to private conversations being published where your father wants to be the tampon of Camilla, just deeply embarrassing. Or watching your mother doing an interview on TV, just horrible, horrible, horrible. But what he really craved, William, was a close-knit family, and also a partner he can really become who he was destined to become. So not only do we have a packed 7th house with sun and moon, right? But the ruler of the 7th house is in the 5th house, right? And yeah, 3 children. I mean, you never know the real story, but of course, the way we look at the pictures, they're an adorable family, traditional, but not snobbish, approachable, la li la. I think they're really serving for a sort of like blueprint for a stable, loving relationship. You get the picture, right? I don't know if you remember Ryan O'Neill, star of Love Story. Who had an immensely successful career in the 60s and 70s, and he was a playboy. He was one of the most attractive men in Hollywood, and he slept around a good deal, and he had a violent streak in him. He grew up in a violent environment as a child. He earned his money as a boxer at one time before he became an actor. And he was entangled in several dysfunctional relationships, ending up with dysfunctional relationships with his children as well. And if we look at the ruler of the 7th house, we are dealing with Saturn here. Again, 11th house, looking for a companion. But if you have a closer look, we have a Saturn square to Mars in the 8th house. So we really must expect some trouble here. These are pictures I brought you. So he is most famous for his relationship with Farrah Fawcett. And Farrah Fawcett was, well, of course, you will remember her from Charlie's Angels, but everybody who met her, she was a Cancer, and she was known for being a gentle heart, a very loving woman who wanted to make sacrifices. And Ryan O'Neill was a very troubled soul. He was a womanizer. He got rid of his first wife. They had several children, and the offspring from that marriage, and Farrah Fawcett died horribly from cancer, went on for years. It was a really sad story, but a love story nonetheless. And that child ended up being a drug addict with a very violent streak, and so on and so forth. It's the reddish boy, the ginger boy, called Redmond O'Neill, right? And in the middle, we find him amongst his family, and on the right-hand side is Tatum O'Neill. I don't know if you remember Tatum O'Neill, who won a child Oscar in 74, I don't know, for Paper Moon, a brilliant movie. Paper Moon, plays in the Depression in the 1930s in America, and she and her father are selling Bibles all over the country. And he was jealous of his daughter. He tried to get rid of her, and they had a really, really roller coaster relationship. So let's have a look at, so he has, in his 5th house, he has Scorpio and Pluto in the 2nd house, and the ruler of the 5th house, Venus, is sitting at his Sun, forming a square to Pluto. So there we find the power issues, the struggles, right? And this is his daughter, Tatum O'Neill, holding grudges. If you look it up on YouTube, they had a whole TV series where it was all about the father and the daughter trying to make amends, which is a big old mess. I mean, it's highly enjoyable, but it's also painful. You would say, oh my goodness. And she was married to John McEnroe, who also had a violent streak and who was just a carbon copy of her dad. Very interesting. So let's have a look. Tatum O'Neill with Libra rising. And that's interesting because she is such a Scorpio. I mean, look at what's going on in Scorpio, but still Libra rising, which makes Aries, the descendant sign. We have Jupiter in the 7th, so we have a very hungry person, hungry for encounters, and the Mars sits in the 3rd house, forming a quincunx with Moon in Cancer. So these are definitely unresolved Moon issues, and whenever you come across a quincunx, something is off. So you have 2 urges, 2 needs, which are very difficult to be lived out at the same time. So this is a very wobbly placement, and also she has a yacht. So Jupiter forms many aspects, amongst others this yacht figure, but that's a different ball game. So I'm usually doing like a whole weekend with aspects and the yacht. It's very interesting. So this is Jane Goodell, whom you all know, I'm sure, Dame Jane Goodell, I should say. And she never wanted to get married, never ever. And when she was a girl, because there were no female role models, at night in her dreams, she either dreamt to become Dr. Dolittle or Tarzan, because she had no female role models in the 1930s. I mean, what women could aspire to was limited. I mean, to marry and get children, or to become a secretary at the very most. But she wanted the jungle, and she wanted apes. She was passionate about all animals, but in particular chimpanzees. And she went up to Africa, did a lot of research there, and then Hugo von Lawick, an aristocrat from the Netherlands who was a photographer, was given the job to do a photo series for the National Geographic, and they fell in love, which was something that Jane never thought she would. And they had a son, Grub, and Grub grew up in the jungle, his first, I don't know, 5 years, and then he had to be sent back to the UK, to her mother, to attend school, and so on and so forth. This is a very romantic, but also very painful relationship, because she at one point realized that her love for the jungle and for the animals and for her own freedom as a researcher, right, as a scientist, was more important than her marriage. And he had other issues as well, but for a couple of years they were very, very happy. So the ruler of the 7th house is again Mercury, and we find Mercury in the 3rd house in opposition with Neptune. And interestingly enough, Neptune is the only placement in Earth we find in this chart. And if I don't know if you are familiar with the work of what's his name? Hold on, just give me a second. I have all my books here. Hold on, because it's so highly recommendable. Sorry, Richard Eiderman, of course, Richard Eiderman, and his books are where you can look it up. But anyway, he is the only astrologer whom I know who came up with the hypothesis that if you have one placement, one planet in one element, this is what he calls a singleton. And normally we would assume that we feel at ease with the elements of which we have plenty of, and so on and so forth. But there is also this hypothesis of the focus, interestingly enough, is where we have very little of. So if you only have like, one planet in air, you would attract a lot of air in your life, and you would try to compensate that doing a lot of air stuff, and so on and so forth. So Jane Goodell, who also has this where you can't read other people's faces, so face blindness. Interesting, isn't it? So she is face blind. So whenever she meets people, she has to say, oh, okay, this is the one always with the earrings, or with this or that hair, or wearing with the blue suit. And so very, very interesting. And this idea of giving yourself to the animals, to nature, to the jungle, building up something for the world, because the world is suffering. This is a Neptunian thing, wouldn't you agree? In the 9th house, the house of travels and, broadening the horizon. And for a certain point in their lives, I think they remained married for like 10 years or so, they really shared that vision. Okay. Oh, my watch tells me that I've already been, a quarter of an hour over time. So please do look up all the charts that you take a keen interest in and know about, like, for example, Doris Day, who was married to her manager, who gambled away all her money. And when he died, she was left with debts up to her head. He gambled away her earnings of 20 years. This is a breathtaking story. And by the way, you find that in my book about the 8th house. Or Salvador Dali, who married his muse, an older woman, a Gala, who became his mother's surrogate. Of course, we know John F. Kennedy, a womanizer. I mean, look at where Mars stands in the 8th house with Jupiter, and So I hope I was able to shed a bit of a sparkle at how interesting it could be to work on the ruler of the 7th house and find out where you and your nearest and dearest, but also your clients, have the ruler of the 7th house, and try to work with it, just play around with it.